We saw it with the announcement of the divorce of Bill and Melinda Gates. COVID divorce, a new term coined by divorce lawyers who are seeing an increase in marriages dissolving during the pandemic. Registered psychotherapist Andrea Groenewald joins us now to discuss. Thanks for joining us today, Andrea.
Thanks, Maggie.
So, Andrea, why are we seeing an increase in marriages dissolving, what some are calling this COVID divorce during the pandemic?
Yeah, we've actually seen an increase of about 22 to 35% in divorce rates over COVID. And that's in addition, if you think about the 35% to 45%, 35% in Canada, 45% in the US. And I think part of that has to do with this sort of existential crisis of thinking about, like, we have this much time, we don't want to take life for granted, and how do I want to live my life?
Yeah, this is what another term called gray divorce, which some are saying that the Gates are going through. No singular event or issue, but a feeling of drifting apart and kind of reassessing, where do you want to be in your life?
Yeah, Maggie, it's really interesting. So divorce rates, like gray divorce rates of couples over 50 years old, it has actually doubled over this past little while. And the research is showing three reasons for that. One is that divorce has become more socially acceptable. The other is that people are living longer, so they're thinking about how they want to live the second half of their life. And the third is that women have become more financially independent, and so they have choices. And if you think of Melinda Gates, for example, she doesn't have to worry about finances. She's probably good.
We're also together all the time, 24/7 through this pandemic. And so how much does that play a role if we put aside this, phenomena of gray divorce and maybe growing apart from each other? How much is just being with each other 24/7 also contributing to this desire to dissolve marriages?
Well, I think it's contributing. We're together. We're not having sort of that time where we have apart. We're seeing each other's stress behavior. And as I like to say, stress behavior is never pretty. We get more agitated. We become more, maybe some people become more goal focused, less relationship focused. We withdraw. And we also see an increase in mental health issues as well, because of all of the things that COVID has taken from us. So we're kind of together in this situation where we're almost confined with one another in our stress behavior. And it's putting a lot of pressure on relationships.
Yeah, let's sit on that a little bit more, the mental health and the stress. When you are so close, you're starting to see patterns in your spouse that they would maybe you wouldn't see during the day because they would go off to their business, a building. You wouldn't see how they're interacting with coworkers. So that stress component, how much of that, just seeing behind the veil a little bit more of how your spouse, your significant other deals with day-to-day issues, contributing maybe to even maybe some of the clients that you're seeing who are choosing to go into therapy or choosing to dissolve their marriage?
Yeah, I think that's a factor for sure. And we've all heard sort of the phrase, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And not only are we together all the time, but we're in the situation of, at the beginning of COVID, stress behavior, a lot of anxiety, increase in addiction. And now I think we're seeing the switch to withdrawing due to grief and loss and depression. And so, when you're seeing your partner in their stress behavior and don't have the fun and times away to offset that, it becomes sort of a tipping point, I think.
Yeah. And then how many marriages, Andrea, are you seeing that were hanging in the balance before the pandemic that are now just tipping over the edge because, as we said, there's a culmination of all of these things, but they've kind of already been in that position where they have been in counseling and they have been struggling? Or are you seeing just families that thought they were fine and everything was great, and then the pandemic just allowed other ideas or other issues to come to the surface?
I think we're seeing both. I think there's an added pressure on existing problems, so it's really intensifying it. I talk about sort of the volume. COVID has turned up the volume on emotional distress. And I think we're seeing some added pieces. We're seeing some responsibilities go up, working from home, you've got the kids at home. Women are still taking a bulk of those responsibilities. And so interestingly enough, we're seeing a significant rise in women initiating divorce. Finances have been affected, in terms of, limited jobs, limited resources, limited finances, limited employment, and all that brings to the relationship. So I think these factors all together are impacting couples and families very significantly. And then you add sort of the mental health issue on top of that. It's having a compounding effect.
Okay, and then there's this new phenomenon called sleep divorce, where couples are they're still together, but they choose to sleep separately. Well, how can that maybe affect a relationship or marriage? Could it affect it positively, negatively? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's a number of reasons in clients that I see and couples I see. It can be health related. It can be sort of more of an issue of convenience or comfort in terms of, a partner who's snoring and makes it difficult for a person to sleep. The more problematic reason, I think, is that sleeping is sort of an intimate act, like putting physical intimacy aside. You're sleeping with somebody, you're very close in proximity. So if you have unresolved conflict in the relationship, it can be very difficult to want to sleep with that other person. So unresolved conflict and resentment and those kinds of things can build up, and then people don't want to sleep together. And people stay together maybe for different reasons, whether it's financial, whether it's because of the kids, or there's other reasons that they don't want to separate or move out. And so this is sort of I guess you could say, a compromise between those two things.
You alluded to kids, and that obviously children are going to be affected by divorce. How does divorce affect children, and what can parents do when they no longer choose to stay together, to just make it a comfortable experience and a little bit easier for the children?
Surprisingly, there's research that shows that kids will do just fine through a divorce if two things are put in place. One is their lives aren't really affected very much. So finances aren't affected a lot. They still get to go to the same school. They still get to have the same friends, and their parents still love them, and they still get to see their parents. The second is pretty obvious, I think, to most people, which is as long as the parents don't put the kids in the middle or talk negatively about the other parent, kids can actually navigate it quite well. But those are two things that are sort of a must. As I like to say to couples who are separating, you need to bite your tongue. If when you feel that need or urge to say something negative about the other person, you need to bite your tongue and just keep that to yourself and vent with your own peers and colleagues.
Last question. What advice would you give couples who might feel like their relationship is buckling under the strain of this pandemic?
Yeah, I think number one is it's really important to find a process whereby you can work out whatever conflict you're having, whether it's financial or otherwise, where you can understand each other and work collaboratively towards a solution that you both feel comfortable about, to balance that time together in a way that you have both. And the third one I would say is really to plan some fun activities that you can do, whether they're outings or in your home, that you can have fun together. Spiritually, I would say, there's a metaphor of a cord of three strands isn't easily broken. And so I think if we can rely on God a little bit more, it takes some of the pressure off our partner to be everything to us. And we can really just enjoy traveling and journeying through this life together as companions.
So good. Thank you so much, Andrea, for your time today.
You're welcome.